You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and as I mentioned in a previous video, today I'll be ranking the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure parts. So the main 5 story arcs that I've seen. There are a total of 8 main story arcs, meaning 8 parts. Obviously each part itself is divided up into multiple little story arcs within the arc, but for simplicity's sake, I'll just be referring to the parts as arcs. So if I use arc and part interchangeably, that's why. As I stated before, this will only cover parts 1 through 5 because I haven't really read that much of the manga. I have seen all of the anime, and I'm currently rewatching certain parts of the anime. For instance, right now I'm currently rewatching Diamond is Unbreakable. I'm not rewatching them in order, I'm just kind of rewatching the ones I feel like watching at that particular moment in time. So I'm rewatching Diamond is Unbreakable now, and then I might go back and watch Phantom Blood and Battle Tendency, and then the Stardust Crusaders OVAs I've also ordered in the mail, so once they get here I'll be watching them as well. I actually just recently started reading the Phantom Blood manga yesterday. In addition to that, I also got back to reading Stone Ocean, so I am currently reading Stone Ocean again. So hopefully I'll finish that in the next little bit here, so I'll have a little bit more there, and then after that maybe I'll start Steel Ball Run. But at the time of this video I've only seen the first 5 parts. Maybe when I'm caught up I'll be able to rank all the other parts and maybe do an updated version of this video. But for now I'll just be ranking the 5 anime parts. Keep in mind that this is very much just my opinion. There is no objective analysis whatsoever in this. This is completely opinion based on my part, and my opinions are very different from the norm. And I would say that although the fan base itself does divide itself up into different tastes, there is somewhat of a consensus on certain things. For instance, a lot of the fan base will say that Phantom Blood is their least favorite part. Obviously, if you've been paying attention to my recent JoJo videos, you know that that is not the opinion I am of, but you'll see where that is on here if you haven't been keeping up with those. And a lot of people will either rank Stardust Crusaders or Battle Tendency as the best. Again, I don't necessarily do that here, but you'll see the rankings here in a minute so you'll understand. This video is going to have spoilers because I'm going to be talking about different things that work and don't work in arcs for me. Again, there is no bad JoJo part. I have liked every part of JoJo that I've seen so far, and what little I've read of Stone Ocean I've liked so far. I've heard mixed things about Stone Ocean, but having only read a couple of chapters, I couldn't say for sure what my thoughts are on it yet. And one other thing when I get into each part, to try and be fair and balanced, I'm going to give some positive and negatives for each part. So, to try and make you understand that there are things that I like and things that I don't like about every part. I mean, nothing in JoJo is perfect, but nothing is bad. And even my favorite arc, I have a few things that I maybe don't like as much as the rest of it. But that's going to be the case with anything. Nothing is perfect. But regardless, let's jump right into it. So number 5, fittingly, we have Part 5, Golden Wind, or Vento Ario. Vento Ario for the manga, and Golden Wind for the anime. Vento Aria is literally just the Italian term for Golden Wind, so either way, calling it Golden Wind is accurate, so that's what I'm going to be calling it henceforth. Let's start off with some positives with Golden Wind. The things that I really like about it. First off, Golden Wind has a Mafia storyline. I love Mafia stories. I don't feel that they necessarily utilize the whole Mafia feel of it as much as I would have liked. Definitely it's there, but I feel like they could have done a little bit more with it to make it feel a little bit more Mafia-like. But overall, the Mafia angle is something that very much works for me. Another thing I think works really well about Part 5 is Giorno has the coolest theme song out of all of the JoJo fighting themes. Not to mention that theme song is utilized perfectly in the 7-page Muda scene, which is probably one of my single most favorite scenes in all of JoJo. That said, why is it ranked so low on this list? Why is it last place out of these 5? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. Reason number 1 is it doesn't feel super relevant to the main story established in the other parts. Yeah, there are some characters that carry over, like Koichi, but he's only in a couple of episodes. Jotaro's only in 2 scenes. Luckily, later on, we do get Polnareff, which I thought was great, even though he turns into a turtle, which was fucking weird, but it worked. Like King Crimson, it just works. And speaking of King Crimson, I have no idea how that stand works. It doesn't necessarily make me angry, but it's definitely something that hurts your brain when you're watching it. The villain, I don't feel is as interesting as some of the other villains. That's not to say that I don't like Diavolo. I love Doppio, his other personality, the sort of innocent, childlike kind of personality he has in Doppio, his right-hand man who's just himself. I like Doppio a lot, with his when he picks up the phone. Love that. Doppio is my shit. If Doppio was the entirety of Diavolo, I'd love him. I do love the kind of yin and yang he's got going for him, sort of, and the fact that he's 2 people, but I don't like Diavolo as much as some of the other villains. I do like him a lot, but not as much. In addition to that, Giorno, he doesn't grip me as much as some of the other JoJos. Like, I wouldn't say he's my least favorite. I'd say I like Giorno a little bit more than Josuke. And it's definitely interesting that he's Dio and Jonathan's son, but they don't really do a lot with that. Like, he has Jonathan's sense of honor to an extent. I guess, he's a thief and stuff because of the Dio in him, but, like, other than a few references, like Muda and Uri, there's not really a lot that him being Dio's son makes relevant to the plot. Like, they just kind of acknowledge it once and then never do anything with it. Giorno doesn't give a shit about the Joestars, he doesn't give a shit about Dio, he doesn't give a shit about any of that. All he cares about is Passione and taking down the boss. Which is great and all. He wants to, clear up the streets so that kids don't get sold drugs, which is admirable. But it's just, he doesn't really feel like a Joestar. Like, I guess technically he would be a Brando, but he'd also be a Joestar. He's a Giovanna, technically. But you know what I mean. He just doesn't feel like he fits in with the other JoJos very well. Like I said, I love Giorno, I do, but, like, he just doesn't grip me as much as, say, Jotaro or Joseph. Or even Jonathan, for that matter. Like I said, I think I like him a little bit more than Josuke, but that's about it. And again, that's not to insult Giorno or Josuke, because I love them both as well. So for number 4, we have, this might be more controversial, because I think ranking Vento Ario at number 5 is a little bit more typical, but this next one might not fit well with some of what the fan base tends to think, because this is one of the two that is typically viewed as the best. So at number 4, we have Part 2, Battle Tendency. And, don't get me wrong, I love Battle Tendency. There's a lot that works right for Battle Tendency. Joseph himself is my second favorite JoJo, not to mention the fact that the Pillarmen are very interesting villains. You got the saddest death in the entire series, which is Caesar's death. In my opinion, that is still the saddest death in the entire series that I've seen. And I love von Stroheim. Von Stroheim is one of my favorite JoJo characters. I think the main reason that this is ranked lower than some of the others, though, is just because it feels kind of like a side story. It almost feels like filler between parts 1 and 3. And that's not necessarily for any fault of Part 2 itself. I think that's just due to the fact that Part 3 feels more like a sequel to Part 1 than Part 2 does. Granted, Part 2 is still very relevant to Part 1, obviously, because it follows up with Jonathan's grandson, Joseph, and it has the origin of the Stone Mask and ties up a few loose ends, and it has some recurring characters in it, like Erina and Speedwagon. And Speedwagon, of course, is like my second or third favorite JoJo character, so, that's good to have him carry over, too. The first time I watched Battle Tendency, it actually took a few episodes to sell me on it, and granted, I got into it once Stroheim was introduced. That's when I really started to like it, but the part that completely sold me on Part 2 was Caesar's death. Caesar's death easily escalated it from being just, that's pretty good, to, I fucking love this. Caesar's death is part of what makes Part 2 great, in my opinion, and Wamu himself is a great character. Wamu should have been the main villain. Cars is cool and all, but I like Wamu a lot better. But yeah, Battle Tendency is great, I fucking love it, but I don't like it as much as the other 3, which we'll be getting into now. So number 3 is fittingly also Part 3, Stardust Crusaders. This is the other one that most people typically consider best. Stardust Crusaders is easily the most recognizable and popular of the JoJo arcs, and for good reason. I love Stardust Crusaders. Jotaro is easily my favorite JoJo, and my favorite JoJo character overall, and one of my all-time favorite anime characters overall. I fucking love Jotaro. Not to mention Part 3 was the return of Dio, and it introduced us to stands, and there's just so much that works really well with it. In fact, Part 3 was also the one that feels most like an adventure, and I think that's another huge part of why I like it, because I love adventure series, and so it's kind of like a road trip across the world to find Dio. And that's why Stardust Crusaders works. I fucking love Stardust Crusaders. It definitely is considered most people's number 1 for a reason. That said, it does get kind of episodic and repetitive with the stand user of the week nature of it, which granted, most JoJo parts have. From Part 3 through to Part 7, they all kind of have that stand of the week feel. From what I understand, in Part 7, it tones down a little bit. Having not read Part 7, I can't say for sure. And having only read a little bit of Part 6, I can't exactly vouch for how that goes either. But I can say 3, 4, and 5 all follow that formula. But part of what makes 3 not as good as the following 2 is some of the stand users are kind of forgettable. The stands themselves are super memorable, but the users, I can't remember any of them. I can remember Steely Dan, I can remember Ndul, and I can remember Oingo and Boingo, but I do not remember Oingo and Boingo for good reason. That's another thing. This is the only arc that has characters that I completely hate. I fucking hate Oingo Boingo. Those two characters are very annoying. That said, just because it has those two characters doesn't mean that I think it has anything wrong with characters. Because I think overall, Part 3 has the best characters. Because it has Jotaro, it has Kakyoin, it has Polnareff, it has Whole Horse, it has Joseph returning, of course, and it has Dio. And Dio is my second favorite JoJo villain. So yeah, Part 3, my number 3 favorite part. It's fucking great. There's a reason it's so popular. So at number 2, we have Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable. I fucking love Diamond's Unbreakable. In my review of Diamond's Unbreakable, I said it was the most lighthearted arc of JoJo, which is still kind of true. But I would also say that Diamond is Unbreakable is also simultaneously the darkest arc of JoJo, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to think that it's both the most lighthearted and the darkest arc at the same time. But I think a huge part of that is just because it's on such a smaller scale that everything feels more real. Part of why Part 4 is so high on my list is because of the world building. I fucking love the world building in Part 4. Like I said in my review, you have a very good understanding by the end of this just how Morio is laid out and where everything is, all of the town's urban legends, all of the inhabitants of the town. Like, Morio feels like a real place just because of how much detail Araki put into it. And I love the stuff with the alien character, Mikitaka, the one who may or may not be an alien. And I like that Araki never answers that question, because it's so much more fun when you don't know whether or not this guy is an alien or a stand user. Hell, I even like Shigechi. A lot of people don't like Shigechi. I fucking love Shigechi. His death was really sad to me. I never felt that he was a bad character. He was just kind of a snotty kid, who just wanted friends, but ultimately didn't know how to deal with it when he got them. And Chase is a good intro. Fight me. But, on top of that, Part 4 also has my all-time favorite JoJo villain, Yoshikage Kira. Yoshikage Kira is fucking great. He's a serial killer who's also trying to blend in with society and just live a quiet life. He also has the same kind of mentality as Whole Horse, where he's like, why be number 1 when you can be number 2 and not be in the limelight? Not to mention Killer Queen is one of the best stands. I still think I like Star Platinum a little bit better, but Killer Queen's probably my second or third favorite stand. Part of what makes Kira so intriguing is he feels more like a real person, because he's relatable, he's likable, he's almost sympathetic, but then he goes around and kills people mercilessly because it's just something he wants to do. It's just an urge that he has. Not to mention, I really like that Part 4 introduced us to ghosts. I think that was a cool concept to be put into JoJo. The slice of life feel is something I was skeptical about at first. First hearing that Part 4 becomes a slice of life. But ultimately, I ironically think that's part of what makes it so good, because I'm not the biggest fan of slice of life series. There's only a couple of things holding Part 4 back, in my opinion. Number one is, I feel like Josuke is probably my least favorite of the 5 JoJos I've encountered so far. That's not to say that I don't like Josuke. I fucking love Josuke. Like, I love all the stuff with his hair, I love Crazy Diamond, and I love Josuke's personality. But he doesn't vibe with me quite as much as Jotaro, Joseph, Jonathan, or even Giorno. But on top of that, Jotaro himself steals the show whenever he's in Part 4. Because Jotaro is in a good chunk of Part 4 and takes up quite a bit of screen time, and he steals the show whenever he's on it, and that's for the better. Because I really like the more mature, reserved Jotaro we get in Part 4. Personality-wise, it's my favorite part of Jotaro. Appearance-wise, I much prefer his Part 3 design, and I also prefer the Part 3 version of Star Platinum. Also, Part 4 is when they started to kind of change the art style, and it's been more or less the Part 4 style since then. Like, I'd say it's progressed more and more. A lot of people like Araki's new style. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I much prefer the Parts 1 through 3 art style. But yeah, I love the world building, I love the villain, and I love the dark atmosphere it has, while simultaneously having the light overtone. Essentially what it is a nice duality of, like, everyday life and all of that, with underneath this dark, menacing, brooding atmosphere. That's another reason I like Chase so much, is because if you pay attention to the lyrics, Chase perfectly describes why Diamond's Unbreakable works. Like here, I'll read an excerpt from the English translation of Chase, just to drive my point home again about why this song is so much better than people give it credit for. My most precious things seem about to be stolen, that by a demon that's burrowed its way into my everyday life. My peaceful moments have already collapsed, being so unconcerned, so nonchalant. Before I even noticed, It had been torn away. If I'm gonna get it back, I have to act right away. So yeah, that's just a little bit of it. I'm not gonna do too much of the lyrics there, but Chase is fucking golden. Anyone who says otherwise is just wrong. Fuck you if you say otherwise. No, but Part 4, easily my number 2 favorite JoJo arc. Now on to my number 1, and if you've been paying attention to the previous parts, you already know what it is. Number 1 is, again fittingly, Part 1, Phantom Blood. Now, this is probably my most controversial JoJo opinion, because Phantom Blood, for whatever reason, is the most hated and overlooked JoJo arc. Most people think Part 1 is boring and generic, and I could see the generic part to an extent, because Part 1 is very much an archetype of 80s fiction. I can recognize that when I see it. But it's just so well done that I really like it. Part of what makes Part 1 my favorite JoJo arc is just how personal everything is. Everything is much more personal with Jonathan and Dio than any of the other parts put together. The way Dio intentionally sets out to ruin Jonathan's life, just so that he can steal his family fortune. The fact that he kills Jonathan's father, he kills his dog, he steals his girlfriend's first kiss, he makes all of his friends turn against him. Everything is so personal on it, and I really like that. And in addition to that, I really like the tragedy of Part 1. The way Jonathan dies at the end was very unexpected to me my first time watching it. And it was very sad, and I didn't see it coming, so it made me really enjoy that tragic ending. I'm a big sucker for tragedy, so maybe that's a personal taste thing, but I really like tragedy, and that was part of what really sold me on the end of Part 1. In addition to that, Part 1 also has a fantastic intro, Sono Chino Sadame, also great. It also perfectly describes it. I'm not going to go so much into detail, but literally the chorus, is the legacy of your bloodline, JoJo, which is literally what the entire series is, the legacy of JoJo's bloodline. Obviously, another thing that makes me like Part 1 so much is fucking Speedwagon. Speedwagon is easily my second or third favorite JoJo character. It's kind of torn between him and Kira. I really like both those characters a lot. I think Speedwagon probably beats out Kira just a little bit. Speedwagon's easily the most important character, plot-wise at the very least, because his foundation aids the entire Joestar lineage throughout all 6 parts of the main universe. I think part of what makes Speedwagon so cool is he starts out as a street thug and then becomes one of the most loyal friends the entire Joestar family has ever had. I'll also say this, I love the Victorian London setting. A lot of people might not be sold on it because of that, but I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. I love Black Butler. I love the fact that Jack the Ripper's in it. Jack the Ripper's always been a fascination of mine, obviously, being into, classical serial killers who were never caught. I love that Part 1 is a horror series. Most of the series doesn't feel that way. Part 1 is very much a horror series because it's got vampires, it's got zombies, it's got a creepy atmosphere, and I think the Victorian London setting adds on to that creepy atmosphere. Not to mention, as I've stated before, I always thought Hammond was more interesting than Stan's, just because Hammond was established for, ever. It was an ancient technique specifically honed to kill the undead, and I really wish they'd have done more with it later on. I hate that Hammond just gets abandoned as soon as stands are introduced. Yes, stands are cool. I love stands. And, like I said, I definitely think that, and I do definitely think the series definitely needed the stands to make it keep going and stay fresh and interesting, but I wish that Hammond would be relevant again. I know that there's the spin in Part 7, which is very similar to Hammond, so I'm interested in that for sure. But, I also really like how pure Jonathan is. I will say this, because like I said, I was going to be fair. Here's my negatives for Part 1. Number 1, Part 1 is way too short, especially in the anime adaptation. It's only 9 episodes. On top of that, I also think that some of the characters can be incredibly one-dimensional, because as much as I love how pure Jonathan is, that's all he is just a pure gentleman. And as much as I love how bad Dio is, that's all he is just a big bad meanie. He's just evil for the sake of being evil, and that's the entire point of Dio's character. They do give him some motivation towards the beginning with, oh, I'll never be poor, I'll rise to the top out of poverty and stuff like that, but, that's not really a whole lot going for it, and it's very much just, oh, Dio's evil because he's evil. That's all there is to it. Oh, Jonathan's good because he's good. That's all there is to it. I definitely see the problems with that, and I'm by no means saying that Jonathan is my favorite character, because again, Jotaro is my favorite character. But just how personal everything is and everything like that, and the story and the setting and the atmosphere, that's what makes me love Part 1 over all the other parts. Part 1 is my favorite JoJo part. That's not to say that the other parts ever did anything wrong. Like I said, all JoJo parts are good, and they're all good for their own reasons, and all of them do have their flaws. And I think it's kind of dumb how much people overlook and shit on Phantom Blood. A lot of people say, oh, Phantom Blood is boring, it's bad, you just gotta power through it so you can get to Battle Tendency. Whereas Battle Tendency, I actually took a minute to get into. Don't get me wrong, I fucking love Battle Tendency, but it took a minute to sell me on it. Whereas Part 1, I was hooked from the very beginning, just because of how personal everything was with Jonathan and Dio, and how malicious Dio was towards Jonathan. But yeah, that's my rankings for JoJo's Part 1 through 5. Like I said, I started reading Stone Ocean again, and I'm also reading Phantom Blood's manga as well. In addition to that, I'm currently watching Diamond is Unbreakable, and then I also ordered the Stardust Crusaders OVAs, so definitely on a big JoJo binge right now. So there might be some more JoJo videos in the future. Hopefully you look forward to that. If not, I apologize, there will be other stuff too. Anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a good one.
Subscribe to Fugitive Red Eye.